All right, who's ready to do a painting? I'll be painting from reference so you can kind of see the decisions I'm making. Now, to find reference, I'm on Ahmed Aldouri's Pinterest account, and he's got all these great pinboards saved. I'm going to go into this one, his Meds 50 Heads. This is kind of an art challenge that is popular on Instagram, and you can just find good reference here. And let's see, scrolling through this, I think this piece of reference here is going to be interesting to paint. There's a bunch of colors we can play with. It's a fun angle. So to put that in Photoshop, I'll right click, say copy image. Here in Photoshop, I'll just hit File New, hit OK, which automatically sets the canvas to the size of that photo. I'll hit Control V for paste, and there's our reference. Now to make a new canvas, now I'll make the canvas I'm going to paint on. So File New, and what I want to do here is just pick a modest size. I'm not worried about going to print or anything like that. Usually if you go to print, you need a pretty big resolution. But here I'm just sketching, in keeping with the theme, getting started with digital painting. So I'm gonna make my canvas, let's say 1200 pixels wide by 1500 pixels tall. And this resolution here, the DPI, dots per inch or pixels per inch, that can just stay at 72. This is a pretty typical canvas size for me when I'm just sketching and playing around with the software. So I'll hit OK. There's my canvas, which is actually pretty close to what this is. That wasn't intentional, but there we go. My interface, of course, is already set up from the previous section. Now I'm going to be painting solely with my Marco Bucci brush pack, the one that you guys also have access to with this class. I am also not really going to edit this in the sense that I'm going to let you see everything pretty much in real time. I might edit out a few ums and ahs, but I'm not going to speed this up, and I'm going to do minimal editing so you can get the best possible sense of the process I go through. So the first thing I'm going to do is just fill my canvas with a neutral color, and I'll go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. This is similar to what we saw in Procreate just a few minutes ago. I'll bring the amount down a little bit, hit OK, grab my smudge tool, uncheck finger painting, and just kind of smudge that noise around a little bit just to get me started with some texture. Grab a brush, let's see, go to my Elena brush, which is a fun little textury type thing. Let's put in just some various colors, keeping my value overall sort of neutral light. It's not perfectly light, it's not perfectly dark. It's somewhere in the higher middle range, let's say. All right. Just something to get me started. Okay, let's make a new layer. And if I want to be fastidious, I will call it line. I will set it to multiply mode. I'll grab my tapered flat brush. And with this brush, with a pretty high brush size and a fairly dark color here, I'll just start drawing this image. Now, I personally don't do a refined line drawing normally. I'm much more comfortable just working with shapes of paint, color and value and stuff like that. And this is where this class doesn't tread too much. This is not a class about the fundamentals of painting. I'm showing you my process here, but I have other classes that, talk about the fundamentals, including my YouTube channel, which is obviously free. And if you haven't seen my YouTube channel, you can check out youtube.com/MarcoBucci for all kinds of art theory lessons and color theory and how to, paint light and shadow and all that. I'll talk about that a little bit here, but that's not the focus of this chapter. The focus of this chapter is, of course, just using the software based on the lessons we've learned so far. Here, I'm just blocking in my starting point. And you know what? I'm going to switch myself to thinking about shapes of light and shadow. I don't need to draw like a perfect eye. As long as I have some reliable shapes of light and shadow, like this eye socket is completely in shadow, and there is a light shape being left behind here, and that nose is way too low. So I'm just sampling something like this. Actually, no, if I sample that and paint with it, it's dark because I'm on my multiply layer. So I'll just go to the erase tool and just erase this out. That nose is much higher. It's up here. And what I'm doing here is I'm working with the shapes of light and shadow as much as I am working with any kind of lines. I like to take measurements, like where do the lips line up? And it's somewhere along the tear duct. This is a common relationship, the corner of the lips lining up with the tear duct. So the tear duct is not perfectly drawn in my image yet, but it's roughly there. I can use that as a measuring stick. I'm not trying to exactly copy the reference anyway. I just want something that's inspired by it. Sometimes what I like to do, even at this early stage, is throw in some color. So what I'll do here, I'll make a new layer. Actually, no, I'll erase that layer. Go back to my background layer, and I will just grab, say, this dry brush. And what I can do is I can set that dry brush to overlay mode, and it'll interact with the colors already on my canvas. I can just block in a basic skin tone. And as you can see, I'm very haphazard about it. Maybe some redness in the cheeks. And while I'm on that red, how about some redness for some of her hair here? And I find sometimes it's just a good idea at this early stage to let colors bleed and just be really liberal with them. Like, don't worry about getting specific decisions made yet. We'll ratchet down on those later, especially with color. Color really doesn't matter. The only time color matters is when it's plugged into shapes and value. So right now I don't have my shapes and values established, so I can do anything I want with color, and I'll just rein it in later. I'll go back up to my line drawing layer and go back to, actually, I'll pick my marker brush, which is, where is that? Somewhere over here. With that selected, back on my line layer, instead of drawing with like a desaturated grayish color like that, I'll put some color in it. Maybe a little bit lighter too. This will kind of just play more nicely with the colors underneath. Sometimes having just pure gray colors on a multiply layer will kind of kill the colors on layers beneath. So in this sense, I'm almost using a colored line. Well, I am using a colored line underneath my, over top of my color layer. I'll probably flatten these layers in a second and just continue on as one painting. This is something I do a lot. But I also want to show you guys, general usage of layers as well. I really like the neckline. It's such a gestural element to this. And it kind of just swings. It's like there's a gesture line running through the head that kind of goes like this. I want to make sure I capture that in this piece. I've extended her brow too high. So, okay. I'm going to take my layers and flatten them. I'm just going to push Control E on that. It brings everything down. One tool that I've shown in other softwares but haven't shown here is the Liquify tool. Filter Liquify. This is like the exact same as what it is in Procreate. It's just loading right now. You can size your brush with the same square bracket keys and, just push things around. This tool here expands things. You kind of click and drag and you can expand things. I don't want to do that though. This one sort of pinches things, but generally I'm on this tool. And you can just reshape stuff. Now, this can be a crutch or it can be a savior, depending on your skill level. If your drawing is okay, like if you have a good foundational level of drawing, I don't see any problem in using the Liquify tool. It's just basically like a shortcut to an eraser. If I were drawing this on paper and I didn't like an area, I would erase it and redraw it. Here, I don't have to erase it. I can just morph it a bit. Hit OK when you're done. You can see the changes. Sometimes, by the way, I like to open the history window, Window History, and you can see the Liquify is the last thing I did, right? I can click back and forth and see the changes I've made and just to see if I like them. In this case, I'm so early in the process that I almost can't tell. I just mostly wanted to show you guys that feature. All right, what I'll do now is switch to my hard round with wet edges. I'll switch it to multiply mode, so it's a darkening brush. And let's get some more color in here. So I'll go to this pinkish thing. I'll reduce the opacity on it. Something like that. I'm doing strokes and pushing undo to kind of just test them out, seeing what they do before I just paint with them. There is a very large shadow running down this entire part. I use undo a lot, by the way. I almost don't even realize how much I do it until I'm recording one of these demos. And I'm like, oh, wow, I do undo a lot. I kind of instinctually have developed a sense for when the stroke is correct. I can't really explain it. And I know that's a bit lame, but I sometimes just don't like the stroke that goes down for any number of reasons, and I'll just undo it and redo it. It's one of those luxuries we have with digital that, you definitely do not have with traditional. And it's nice to say, hey, that stroke didn't do what I wanted it to do. Let's push undo. It can be nice to map your undo button to your tablet's front rocker switch. This is what I do with mine. So because I'm clutching my pen, my stylus at all times, all I have to do is my finger is naturally positioned on the front, button on my tablet, and I can just push undo whenever I want. So I've also developed a bit of a trigger happy finger as a result, like an undo trigger happy finger, which is maybe not the best habit, but that's what I do. All right, let's switch that brush out of multiply, go back to normal, and let's just put in some semblance of the sky background. My opacity is still low, so let's raise that up. And there we go. Let's get some sort of sky in there. Interestingly enough, her hair is lighter than the sky, which is a rare relationship. It usually is the opposite. Usually hair is darker than the sky, but in this case it's not, it's lighter. And I'm just scribbling in here. You could use any brush you want for this. I could have gotten an airbrush, something more smooth. Maybe like take the hard round brush, but in the brush settings, just take that hardness way down. It kind of becomes an airbrush essentially, and I could block in the sky this way. Although that kind of obliterates a lot of my nice digital noise texture that I started with. So I usually don't like to use airbrushes. I often will opt for more textural strokes. Like I really like the smudge tool a lot. It allows me to carve out silhouettes in a way that just reminds me more of traditional paint. I use airbrushes in traditional paint as well, but for me it's a bit of a pain to load an airbrush and then make sure it's clean and spray it. All that stuff comes at a cost of time. So I don't use the airbrush as much as I do just a regular impasto bristle brush or smudging things with my fingers and stuff like that. All right, so I'm building up some value on her hair. I'm already detecting that I am elongating her face a little bit. So I want to work on these all-important shadow shapes, the measurement of which will determine the quality of my drawing. So like if I elongate her face, that's equivalent to me saying the drawing is bad, because you don't want to unintentionally change proportions. If you intentionally change proportions, that's a whole different story. That's fine. But in this case, I want her to look human. I'm not trying to do a donkey-like caricature of this person. So let's see where we're at here. It's actually quite difficult for me, to paint and think and talk about my thoughts all at the same time. Usually it's all I can do, usually it's all I can do to just handle the first two of those. There are kind of like three color areas of the head. The brow I like to generally tint toward the oranges, and I'll try and exaggerate this here for you. It'll all work out in the end, trust me. I'll exaggerate the brow toward the golden hues. Did I say orange? I meant like orangey yellows, ocheries and stuff. Then I will gradate the cheeks toward a reddish, pinkish, blood-like hue. Reds in this case. She kind of has some pinks that sort of harmonize with her hair as well, which I really like. Let's actually boldly push into the pink family. And this is, by the way, is where you could get a brush, switch your brush to, say, overlay, or even color mode is a good one for this. Color mode preserves your values, but just changes the color. So if I wanted to glaze in some pinks, I could do that with color. And this is actually nice. This is like a watercolor wash almost, like a very wet wash of watercolor. So it doesn't matter that, like, I can pick a very dark red, and it kind of matters in how much color it's adding, but it doesn't darken the values is what I'm trying to get at. Color mode sort of generally works best when it's up here. I'll even push into some of the pinks. So if you have like a value sketch like I roughly have going here, color mode can be good to just quickly block in some color. I could even change the sky to add just a few more hints of blue to this. And this is, I'm gonna crop this. I don't need this much of the canvas. Kind of is more interesting, I think, if we offset her. Not that I'm going for an interesting composition, but I do think when you're sketching and just doing art for no reason, well, I mean, I'm doing this art as a demo for you guys, but I'm not going to publish this in any portfolio or anything. I'm probably not going to share this to social media except for maybe a trailer for the class. My point is, whenever you're sketching, still try and make an appealing composition. It exercises good habits, like good art muscles. It's usually like, some people will say, oh, I'm just sketching. I don't care about brushstrokes or composition. I still care about those things even when I'm sketching. Now, I'm not trying to make it a finished masterpiece, but if I can make a compositional idea change that affects the overall driving idea behind the piece, like how it's perceived, that's just as much to me a part of the art as, as anything else. All right, I'm working on my values here. Oh, here's a cool little tip. Make a new layer, fill it with white, and then set it to color mode, and it strips out the saturation. So essentially we have a black and white filter. Usually what I like to do is lock that layer, and then so I can't paint on it, like Photoshop won't let me paint on it. And then I can just switch it on and off. So I have a nice little handy black and white filter layer. Experts in Photoshop will be quick to tell me that there are better ways to do that, and I know you can go up here and arrange all kinds of stuff, but it gets technical. This is just a very simple way, and this way works in Krita, Procreate, and other softwares too. So of course you can have this on, go underneath, so I'm on my painting layer now, and I can continue painting, even with color. Like I can continue painting. I can't see the color, of course, but I can continue painting with colors while judging values only. This is an incredibly handy way to paint. Now you'll want to turn that back on to judge your color. So, or at least, sorry, turn this off to judge your color. And I can see my blues are a bit out of place there, but I know they work value-wise. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to keep them on the canvas. I'm just going to adjust the colors. A few minutes ago, I was talking about the 3 color zones of the head. I mentioned the ochre stuff up top, the reddish pinkish stuff in the middle. The bottom is kind of like almost, it's cooler. Sometimes it's greenish, sometimes it's like gray or reddish. It's just cooler than that red up in the cheeks. Sometimes you can even push into some blues, especially if you're painting men with like 5 o'clock shadows. Generally that facial hair, that stubble will push colors into a much cooler zone. She has elements of it, the cooler color that is. And I'm going to exaggerate it a little bit. I should basically outright say I'm not interested in copying the colors of the picture. I would like to do something more interesting than the photo. And this is not saying that I'm better than a camera. It's just saying that in my own pursuit of art, one of the things that drives me is changing nature, but in the direction that nature is already going. So it's like a caricature. When you think of a caricature, what do you think of? You think of like changing someone's facial features, but in the direction they already are. So like if someone has a naturally large nose, a caricature is going to give them a massive nose. It's not going to give them a small nose because that's opposite of what's happening. You're going to caricature what's there and just raise the volume to 11. That's what I do with color a lot of the time. I see the relationships of warm and cool that nature is giving me, and I will do my best to understand what that relationship is, and I'll just raise the volume on it. If you want to know more about color theory and stuff, well, check out my YouTube channel first, which is free, but my other classes, Digital Painting 3 is a good one. Digital Painting 2 has some good stuff in it, and oddly, my children's book class, Illustrating Children's Books and Beyond is what it's called, has some really good info, a whole chapter dedicated to my personal color theory. You can check that out as well. Obviously, here I'm focused on applying that stuff. Okay, just for fun, I'm going to do something off the beaten path. I'm going to duplicate this layer, filter gallery, and let's go into my angled strokes, which loads up by default. You can see my settings here. Okay, I'll play with them a little bit. Hit OK. And we have this thing. I'm going to make a layer mask. With the layer mask selected, I'll push Control-I to invert it so nothing appears to show through. To do that on the menu, by the way, if I just go back to this, you can just go to Image, Adjustments, Invert, and it says the shortcut Control-I right there. So this essentially does nothing, or it appears to do nothing. That this layer now is deactivated, essentially, because nothing is showing through with the layer mask. So what I'll do is I will select the layer mask, get a brush, and with a white color, I can reveal that effect. And I don't know, I'm just using this as a way to keep the strokes feeling a little fresh. This is digital is offering me some effects here, and let's just use them. With that done, this is sort of before and after. All right, I'll push Control-E to merge it down. So I'm still working on just this one layer, and that's pretty common for me. I'll try some effects out, whether it be scaling or, the filter gallery like I just did, the dry brush strokes. Directional strokes, and then once I'm happy with whatever edit I'm doing, I will commit myself to it by merging it. And, at this point, I'm just putting more brushstrokes over my image, which means that I'm fully committed to it. I can't really go back and undo it. Well, I could, but then I'd have to go back through all these brushstrokes, losing major progress. I prefer to work with what I've got than have the ability to edit everything at all times. People often say one of the best parts about digital paint is that you can edit anything at any time. And one of the worst parts about digital paint is that you can edit anything at any time. For those of you who are used to traditional media, what it feels like to commit to something. Once that watercolor brush goes down, that's it. You have made the decision. With oil, I suppose it's a bit more forgiving, and acrylic, same deal. But even those mediums, you can't just overlay things forever. Let's get some texture. I don't like to sample the image, by the way. I like to sample my painting, but I don't know, just for fun, let's sample her jacket. I don't even know what this is. Texture? I can't explain to you what this is, but I will smudge it out. It's going to look interesting in the end, I think. I actually don't know, but I've been painting long enough to know that I can make something like this work. I've done it before. This is my smudge tool, by the way. And remember, I have finger painting on, which means that it'll actually make a stroke with what the color is. And sometimes I like to just paint mistakes, like that purple in the sky is not supposed to be there, but the act of painting into it will make it interesting. Hopefully. I don't know. I don't actually know that to be true, but you can often intentionally make quote unquote mistakes, and then the act of working into them makes them become a feature of the work. It's kind of like setting some kind of restriction on yourself and forcing yourself to work with what you've got. It enables ingenuity in a way that trying to keep things perfect never can. All right, I'm going to switch this brush to linear dodge mode and grab a color. Actually, you know what? I'm going to pick a different brush for this. Let's go with, let's just go with my hard round brush, change it more to an airbrush by decreasing the hardness, get rid of the noise, and I'll change it to linear dodge. And I want that hair to start glowing a little bit like it is in the photograph. And also even the top of her head generally needs to be much lighter than the lower third of her head. So something like this. I'm just tapping my airbrush. Can you hear me tapping my tablet? Very lightly, not doing this, just tapping it very lightly with this color. Maybe I'll change my color, throw this a little bit more lighter and in the reds a little bit. Something like that. I can also switch it to overlay mode. Actually, no, let's go to multiply mode, which is a darkening version, as you know. Let's set a very light color, which means it's only going to darken a little bit, and just darken the lower part of the painting, just so the light really, really looks like it's coming in strongly from the top. This is a Rembrandt thing. I'm not comparing myself to Rembrandt, believe me, but I have learned from Rembrandt this thing about the egg principle. The egg principle, if you kind of think of the human head as an egg, the top of the egg, when the light's coming from above, the top of the egg faces the light more so than the bottom of the egg. So even though the bottom of the egg, her jaw here, is getting hit by light, the top of the egg gets it more directly. So Rembrandt popularized this aesthetic where he would do the same kind of value organization where the chin and cheeks would get slightly darker values than the forehead and stuff, and the nose. And you can just check out Rembrandt's work and look at that. He was really a master. A lot of people call Rembrandt the Dutch Sargent. Sargent being like the American god of painting, in my opinion. That's not really true. Sargent, there are many gods of painting. Sargent is just one of them. Her hair and shadow. Let's pump in some subtle blues. Get a textured brush because I like the shape of shadow I have. Just gonna use my Helena brush to just put in some blue color notes. I don't want to lose the soft edge though between this red and the blue, so I'll just smudge that out. You notice I'm editing the value. In the photo, it's much darker here. Actually, I'm going to undo a few steps. In the photo, it's much darker. And while I could, let me get my watercolor brush. I could go darker. I don't want to go as dark as it is in the photo, and I don't like those brush strokes, so I'm undoing. I'm gonna get my wet edge brush instead, which is a bit nicer, maybe reduce the opacity a little bit. So I want a bit of darkening here, but not as much as the photo. I can't tell you why, I just think it'll look nicer. I could be wrong. That's the whole thing about sketching and just playing around. You're testing your theories. You have all these aesthetic theories on how things should look, or how things could look, is maybe a better way of saying it. And then you paint to test it out. I've been a teacher for more than 10 years now, and one thing I have found over and over with students is that they're very anxious, maybe that's the wrong word, they're very intent on painting for the frame. They want, in general, a lot of students, including me when I was first a student, want their paintings to go in a frame. In fact, I remember doing this explicitly when I was younger. I bought a frame at IKEA and I had to fill it up. So I just did paintings, and like, I wouldn't even really edit myself. Every painting I did, I would put it in the frame. And it's kind of I don't do that anymore. For every painting that makes it into a frame for me, honestly, 100 paintings don't see the light of day. And that's kind of a ratio that will maybe help you improve a little bit. When you're painting for the frame, I guess the mentality is you want things to be just so. But the nature of being an artist is that you can't always control that. The better you get, the more likely you are to hit that mark, but it's not something you can expect of yourself every time. So, me recording this live demo for you right now, I think this will work. I think it's working, but I was definitely anxious about it. When I woke up this morning, I'm like, oh, I got to record this painting. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but that's the nature of being an artist. If you're ever positive that what you're going to do is going to work, you probably have a blind spot that you should address. There is some light coming down here, and she's got a red shirt that will be a really nice way to kind of bind the colors here. And I want to crop it again. I don't need this much room at the bottom. I don't even need this much room at the side. Let's go with that. One little tip that can help is flipping the canvas. Image rotation, flip canvas horizontal. This will help you spot little drawing errors. I'm noticing that her head is slightly skewed this way. I mean, I could flip this one too, image rotation horizontal, just to stay tuned into the reference. I flip my canvas all the time when I work because it psychologically sort of allows you to see your image almost as though you're seeing it for the first time. And all these little shapes and drawing decisions that you've become used to suddenly come to the fore, and you can detect errors pretty quickly. So it's not bad. I'm not far off of things, but I do feel like I'm adjusting some important shapes that I might not have caught otherwise. And I'll work this way for a bit. This works also when you're just painting from imagination. You can also flip your canvas like this, even though you don't have reference to compare it to. The effect is the same, where you suddenly see with fresh eyes what you've been creating. And sometimes it can be like seeing a monster. You're like, oh my gosh, I did that? It's almost like, sometimes it's like almost a sick joke. Like, come on, it looks like that? It's amazing. The better you get with drawing, not that I've mastered it, but the better you get with drawing, the more you'll be able to see your shapes clearly all the time. Again, I'm not there yet, but getting there, I guess, slowly but surely. I wonder if someone like Sargent could do that. I don't know. I do know that Sargent had a big mirror in his studio, though, and that's what traditional painters do. They have mirrors in their studio, or a mirror allows them to, and usually that mirror is placed far away as well, so you can kind of like zoom out, flip the canvas, optically in the mirror, and see your progress. Zooming out is helpful, although that's where I have the Navigator window open, which I don't have open now. Navigator, I showed you this in chapter 1. This can help too. And some people, usually I have 2 monitors. I'll usually keep this on my other screen. It kind of takes up too much real estate when I have it open on one screen. But in this case, I'll just throw it over here. All right. Again, there are differences between my painting and the photograph, but I'm okay with that. I'm not trying to copy it shape for shape like a photocopier. I'm trying to make my version of it. Like the neck is longer, but that was intentional. Some of the proportions have been adjusted, some of them unintentional, but all of which I'm okay with right now. Unless I'm not seeing something, which is totally possible, I might have to take a quick break on this and then, come back in an hour with some fresh eyes and reevaluate. Just darkening some of the shadow there, but making sure I don't kill the nice reflected light on her chin here. There is a underside of her head that needs some light. There's a whole, like the underside of the head is like a shelf, and there's reflected light hitting the bottom side of that shelf as it points down toward the ground, or actually it's pointing, this is the area I'm talking about here. It's pointing down toward her chest, which is getting light. So light is bouncing up off the chest onto the underside of her head. This is a classic bit of bounce light that often causes the underside of the head, when it's visible, to actually be quite warm. And that's when the light is coming from above, because the light will come from above, bounce off like a chest or something, and then illuminate the shadow. I want a nice straight line here. Oh, one tool I don't think I showed you is Photoshop's line tool. It's here somewhere. I'm honestly having trouble finding it. Oh, here it is, line tool. You can draw a line by clicking and dragging. And I like this because I think in this case, there's a very graphic statement with the way her clothing goes. And I kind of want to use a line tool. I don't know why. I want to react to this in a very linear way. You can even, I don't know. This is the fun of sketching. I have no idea what I'm doing, yet I am confident that something good will come of it. And I've been proven wrong before, but that doesn't dissuade me. And you guys didn't know this, but as I record this, today is my birthday, so I feel extra confident today. A little birthday gift to myself. I'm not going to allow myself to be trepidatious over this stuff. I'm just going to go for it. I really like some of the quality of the bounce light that I'm getting in this painting. Partially credit to the original photograph here, because there's so much beautiful bounce light in it. But I feel like the decision to heighten it was the right one. Or at the very least, it's giving me some opportunities for some interesting lighting. Let me switch my canvas back, flip horizontal. By the way, sometimes you flip it vertical. It's abstract now, but it allows you to see your painting even from a different set of fresh eyes. And I'll flip this one back too. All right, to continue with the theme of texture, I'll add a new layer. I'm going to fill it with some light color, say like that, but I'll switch it to multiply, then go filter, noise, add noise, similar to what we just saw, but I'll hit OK. This time I'll zoom way out, push Control T, which brings up my transform, and just scale that noise way up. Hit enter, zoom back in, and that noise is massive, right? What I'll do is I will make a layer mask, Control I again to invert the layer mask. This is a process I use a lot. I'll grab a brush, paint with white, and just paint some of this noise into the scene. I'm really interested in putting it where her jacket is to almost give me that fabric look without having to paint anything. Isn't digital great? You can cheat your head off, which I am totally fine with. You can cheat in traditional too. I remember watching Drew Struzan paint, one of my favorite artists, Drew Struzan, and he was showing how he achieves textures traditionally. It has to do with toothbrushes and broken spritzer bottles that spatter paint. This is just the digital equivalent. I mean, I don't call it cheating other than just to be facetious here, but whatever you can do to make the marks. Once I'm happy with it, once again, I will hit Control E and merge it down. My overall theory with learning art is you should be able to go about your drawing and painting in a fairly no-frills way. Like if you didn't have texture tools and liquify tools, you should still be able to draw well. Once you can do that, and that takes years to learn. It's not like, these skills don't happen overnight. Once you acquire those skills, then you have access to the entire playground of digital. And of course, you have access to it anyway, but I don't recommend really relying on any of digital's fun little tools until you have the confidence of being able to do it, let's say, manually. And then it's a free-for-all. But in terms of getting started with digital paint, what this class is about, I want to show you these tools so you can use them yourself. Like, you can experiment with them. I feel like my shadow needs to be shaped more that way. And I'm a big fan of putting blues in places where there shouldn't be blues. So how about if I find some blue? If any of you here have heard my audiobook, Creativity in the Campfire, there's a little section on this artist who used, who put a blue bit of paint near the model's nose. Like on her painting, she put some blue paint on the nose, and it made zero sense. Like that, kind of like that blue stroke right there. It made zero sense, but like it looked incredible. Like something about it just sung. And ever since that day, back in, that was probably 2008, 2009, I've been obsessed with, it was like this turquoisey blue. I've been obsessed with this color. It happens to be similar to the color of the sky. So especially with her white, bleached hair, that bleached hair is going to really pick up a lot of those blue tones from the sky. I wonder if I can shift my blues here into the violets and find little neighboring color notes. My rake brush here can be useful for just maybe finding a little bit of hair direction. I'm really not the type of person to render hair. I mean, I will, depending on who I'm working for and what the job requires. But if I'm painting for myself, I will be hard pressed to ever render a hair. I will oftentimes make use of a sort of rake style brush like this to imply hair, like strands of hair, I mean. Rendering hair can be done without rendering strands, and I'm usually more interested in that. But, it depends. I don't always do anything, but my natural predilection is for more painterly solutions, which is what I am doing here. I feel like I need some of the sky, still on my rake brush here, but I feel like I need some of the sky to be a little bit more pronounced to help her hair continue to pop out here. And while I'm here, I'll throw some of that sky, the darker sky, on top. The rake brush makes very obvious brush strokes. It can get very out of hand very quickly. So I'm on the rake brush for a while now, but I almost have a little timer in my head that's ticking away with how long I'm using this rake brush. And once the timer goes off, I have to click away from this brush, which is right now. It's too much rake brush going on. So the nice thing about, like I've shown you in the brushes section, is you can just smudge away, these marks that you feel could be edited or altered, or like there's too much rake brush, just smudge it away. And that way you're maintaining forward progress. Again, with digital, you have limitless undos. Essentially, you can just put a brush stroke down and undo it till the cows come home, but doing so will not help train confidence. I'm a much bigger advocate of putting something down, and if you don't like it, don't undo it. Work with it. Now, I'm a hypocrite here because I already just said a few minutes ago that I undo a lot of brush strokes. I do. I use undo as well. But, put something down, and instead of, I got to dig myself out of this hole here. I only started using undo a lot when I started having ideas of how the brush stroke should look. But if you don't have those ideas yet, put stuff down and work with it, because that's how you can develop your personal aesthetic. Some of you may already have it. If you come from a traditional media background where you do have that kind of confidence of how a brushstroke should look, you might, want to seek that out digitally, and you'll have very clear ideas. But for those of you who maybe are starting out with digital paint, try and put something down and work with it, and see if you can mold your ideas almost like live on the canvas, rather than relying on undo. Because if you're just starting out with art, chances are you can't trust yourself to know when the stroke is correct, because you don't have the experience yet. You have to build up to it like anyone else. So try not to undo so much. I think I've been doing this for 20 years. I kind of know why I'm undoing something. But hey, there's no rules, so go crazy with Control Z if you so choose. I'm using a multiply brush here. Sometimes I like to reduce the opacity on multiply brushes so I can even more than that. So I can press really hard with my tablet, which I like to do. Just tactily, I like to press hard on my drawing tools. I always have with my pencils, pens, and tablets. I like to press hard. So sometimes when it's when it's set to 100% and I press hard, it's too opaque. So I'll just reduce the opacity. Get a nice dark accent here for the corner of the mouth. A dark accent just underneath the lower lip. And I almost want to go back into the liquify tool to change some of the lip's relationship to the chin, but I will resist the urge for a second and see if maybe just editing some of the shadow shapes will do it. She has a lipstick on, which is causing her lips to go very saturated red, so I will get that in now. Being sure, though, to make sure I am tracking this cast shadow. When it comes to calling the art finished, the nice thing about just sketching like this for no real reason other than to just sketch, you can call it done whenever you want. This could be done right now. The information is there, the main information. This is not something you'd call a rendered finish, but I'm not going after a rendered finish. So there comes a point where it's just call it done and move on. I'm not quite there yet, though. I'll spend another, 5 or 6 minutes on this. I'm not sure. Still working away at the shapes of light and shadow here. The cast shadow from the nose meeting the light of the cheek. There's a very important line here. It describes the form of the nose and the muzzle area as it slides down and around the mouth. These shapes are everything when it comes to the quality of drawing in your paintings. And I'm not really speaking well right now because I am just focused on small shapes. There comes a point in time in your painting where, focusing on very small shapes or details, you might say, is what you have to do. At first, I encourage focusing on larger shapes, larger drawing bits. But then once you have those, chances are your smaller shapes won't be perfect, or at least they won't be exactly where you want them to be. I don't know if they're ever perfect, but they won't be where you want them to be. So you have to ratchet down and focus on those. I haven't really reached my final value on her eyes, although I kind of do like how I've kept them lighter than the original. I didn't intend that, but I kind of like it. I almost don't want to over darken them. Can work on it a bit here. The white of the eye often goes a bit colder, but not much. Switch this brush to multiply, lower the opacity as I always do. And try and hit some of the shadows on the underside of her eyelids there. Darken the eyebrows a little bit. All right. I am becoming quite interested in finishing this sketch. Let's go to set a new layer to multiply mode. I will get the gradient tool out and let's see if I can hit it with a bit of a gradient there. Erase out the nice red shirt. That's nice. Control E, merge it down. And let's just get in, that shirt should be much lighter. And it goes into shadow here, so let's get that. And I think, let's see, the jacket comes into light there, which I mean, I don't really need to be that faithful to it. I do want to crop this though. I still don't think I need quite this much space. Not that I'm trying to crop exactly to the original, which it kind of looks like I'm doing. It's just I'm more and more realizing that sometimes finishing a sketch means cropping away the stuff you haven't dealt with yet. Because if you haven't dealt with something this long, putting it in at this point almost kind of feels like you're adding stuff that doesn't need to be there. Usually when I do my more, finished illustration, things are planned out more. So like I know exactly what the cropping is going into it. When I sketch, I'm fully willing to just improvise and crop away stuff that, is not really being useful. Even if it means, reducing the workload for me, I'm okay with that type of decision. All right, looking pretty good here. Let's just maybe darken the eyes a bit. She has really pronounced eyelashes. I don't want to get in there. Here's what I don't want to do. I don't want to get in there and start doing this because it really makes things look fake. There are ways to render eyelashes without doing that. This being a sketch, this is where I would actually recommend maybe going into the filter gallery and going into dry brush and hit OK, Control Shift F to fade it back and just kind of see something like this. See what Photoshop does to simplify that. And this is kind of nice. Maybe I can do something where it's just maybe some thicker darks up here and not literally eyelash by eyelash. Maybe something like this will yield the effect of thick eyelashes that will suit this, that will live harmoniously in this painterly kind of style. Again, I totally think there are times to render out each eyelash. I don't think this is the time to do it. I've done it before and I'll do it again, but oftentimes there are other solutions, and just my own tastes as an artist, I'm usually less interested in finicky details like that. Well, they're not finicky. I feel finicky when I do them, and I don't enjoy that feeling. And I more enjoy work that finds ways to simulate the effect of complexity, but with simple decisions. That's just the work I'm drawn to, so I try and do it myself. It has no bearing on what's correct or what's not, because that doesn't exist. What's correct or what's not is what you think it is. And then once that's informed by experience, that's when you become, in the realm of professional. When you have strong aesthetic opinions with a lot of experience to back them up and execute them, that's when people will start seeing you as a professional, because the conviction you have in your art will show through. Whereas if you're a beginner to art, you simply won't have those convictions yet, and you shouldn't, because you need to explore them and develop them. And the act of doing so will eventually give you that conviction. It's a pretty logical process that you can't really shortcut. Classes like mine and other painters' classes are fantastic. They're accelerants, but they're not shortcuts. This class will only get you to a point, and then at that point, you'll plateau and have to just go through it with good old time. This class might save you several days of learning, because I can show, I'm showing you exactly where things are and relatively how they're used, or at least how I use them. And you might be able to, that can be a little bit of a shortcut, or not a shortcut, sorry, an accelerant. But when it comes to using the tools like we're doing here in painting, I can't really explain exactly why I am pressing the stylus so softly right now. It has something to do with the light striking the eyebrow. And even though it's much darker in the reference, I think this would be more powerful if I let the darks exist mostly in the shadow and lightened them up here in the lights. I also wonder if I went into liquify, if I can add a bit more depth to the eye socket. This is something I wish you could do with oil paint. Wish you could do this. Because I feel like I'm still drawing. I'm just using some digital tools to aid that process. I'm still using my decision making, right? It's not like liquify is some all-knowing solution. Let's go with something like that. Hit OK. That's nice. There's a bit of a line there. like an invisible line that connects the eyebrows. There should be a halftone underneath for the glabella here. Here's something I do sometimes. I'll overshoot this halftone like this. This is too dark, but I'll push Control-Shift-F and fade it back till it is the correct value, something like that. And then I will use the smudge tool and smudge this out. You know, and this is the time when it's like the sketch tells you what it needs. Just look at it. You know, I can't really, it's one of those things, again, that defies explanation, but look at your work and just things will jump out at you. Sometimes it requires a break. Like I said, take a break and come back. The next day even, you know, go to sleep if it's late at night and then come back. Or if it's a sketch that's just going to be a throwaway, you know, maybe flip the canvas a few times and do a quick once over before calling it finished. Do any last minute adjustments. You notice this is probably the first time in the whole sketch where I'm zoomed in, and I'm still not even really zoomed into 100%. Well, now I am, but I was zoomed into like 75% before. You know, most of this painting was performed zoomed out. And this is something that's very typical of my process. I work a lot just zoomed way out like this. Let's get some purple notes in the hair. Not to color her hair purple, but just to harmonize with some of the other purples that are in the scene. Purples, pinks, whatever color that is. It's funny, I know color theory, but I don't know color names. My wife makes fun of me all the time. To me, purple is pink and orange is red, and I have no idea what I'm looking at. And I'm not colorblind, like, at least I don't think I am, but I just don't know color names very well. Sometimes people are like, I want this to be a taupe color. And I'm like, what the heck is that? Is taupe even a color? Taupe? I don't even know. See, I don't even know what the word is. All right. Yeah, I could noodle at this forever. Let's call this finished. One thing I haven't shown you yet is saving and exporting your file. I actually haven't saved this file yet. I'll go up to File, Save As, and select your folder, and I'll just call this PS for Photoshop Demo. The default file type is Photoshop PSD. This is an uncompressed format that saves all your layers if you have any, and doesn't compromise on image quality at all. This is the format you'd save to if you're working on a project, so I'll just push Save. Then of course I could close this, and to reopen it you could go to File, Open Recent, and it's your most recent file. And again, if I had layers on this, all my layers would be preserved. Now when you're ready to save it for, say, the internet, or attaching it to an email or something, first you might want to make sure it's friendly sized for that format. To do that, you could go to Image, Image Size, and this size will display just fine on monitors and smartphones and whatever, but if you had like a 5,000 pixel canvas, it might be too large. So to shrink that down, make sure the chain is checked on. That'll preserve the proportions, and like make this say 900. The width automatically updates, hit OK, and you know, I've shrunk my image. I'll undo that though, because I don't actually want to shrink this image. But to save it out, I'll just say File, Save As, and I'll click on here and select JPEG is probably the most common. So if I hit JPEG, push save, you get this quality bar. I like to use 8 as kind of a go-to default. If you want something the super high quality, just drag it up to 12. But 8 is generally what I upload to Instagram and my website and etc. Hit OK, and you're done. You now have a JPEG that's ready to go. And okay, that concludes the Photoshop demo. I hope you enjoyed that. Let's go paint something now in Krita.